So here we have the video for Integrated 2 5.1.3, get introduced to the zero product property. So one of the things with the assignments that we've already experienced is the fact that we know that whenever you have a multiplication problem and you are multiplying by 0 at any point in time, that the answer is definitely going to be 0. So 0 multiplication just wipes out whatever's there. That's what we're going to be following along with here. So the meaning with this is in the name. So there's going to be a 0 involved and there's going to be a product that occurs. All right, so if we take a look at this comes directly from the notes. Basic, very, very, very basic. If you have two things that are being multiplied together, any two things that get multiplied together and the answer is 0, then we know for sure at least one of those things is 0. Maybe both of them are. We don't know, but at least one of them is. So if we take a look at this example here that we've got, it's identified as 2x minus 3x plus 5. Now it's already worked out there, but I'm going to go ahead and take a look at it down here as well so you can kind of see my thought process as I'm going through this. So we've got 2x minus 3 and x plus 5. Notice that we have a couple of the requirements already satisfied. So 0, yes, there's a 0. It's equal to 0. So that's important. Product, absolutely. You need to make sure that the things that are being multiplied together, so it's got to be multiplication. So that's the special thing that has to do with zeros and multiplying. So they wipe each other out, or at least the 0 knocks out the other thing. So here's what I do when I go through and I try to use zero product property. You need to locate where the multiplication actually occurs. So if I take a look at just the left-hand side, so just over here, I have these two factors. I've got the 2x minus 3 in the first set of parentheses, and then I have the x plus 5 in the second set of parentheses. I know that this is a product because I have these two parentheses kind of butted right up against each other. And you know the only operation we don't actually have to put the symbol for is multiplication. So to find where the multiplication is occurring, I actually look to see where the two factors, parentheses, kind of butt up against, right against each other. So I am going to go to where that multiplication occurs. And I'm going to put a little dot there. So there's my orange dot. That's my multiplication that's actually happening. As soon as I locate that, I split this thing. So I want to take a look at the factors separate from each other. So using this whole idea of product property. So if I have these two things, 2x minus 3 and x plus 5, and they are multiplied together, which they are, and I am getting an answer that is equal to 0. The only way that's going to happen is if one of those things, maybe both, is equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up these little miniature equations. So I'm going to take this 2x minus, because maybe that factor is the 0. Maybe that's the thing that when I multiply times the x plus 5 turns into 0. And I'm going to go ahead and solve that. So I just end up with this little miniature equation that I need to solve. So I'm going to add 3 to each side. Those are going to cancel. I'll get 2x is equal to 3. And then keep going until you get down to x equals. So the 2's cancel. It looks like x is equal to 3 halves. So basically what this is saying, and I'm just going to stick with the first one so far, is if I take that 2x minus 3 times x plus 5, so go back to the original question, set equal to 0. If I take the answer that I just got, x equals 3 halves, and I plug it in for all of the x's, so there's 2. Let's go ahead and pull this out. We'll put the 3 halves in that we just found, bring everything else down. And I'm using longer parentheses only because I'm plugging a fraction in. Okay, if we take a look at this, I can look at both parentheses, but it doesn't matter which one gives me a 0. It's just that I need a 0. So I'm going to take a look inside the first set of parentheses where I actually got this 0 to show up. So if I multiply those two, notice that the 2's are going to cancel. I have a 2 on the top and a 2 on the bottom, so those simplify. So now if I take a look at this, it looks like the inside of this parenthesis is going to be 3 minus 3. But we know that 3 minus 3 is 0. Now, to be honest with you, I don't care what happens with the other set of parentheses because I got the 0 I'm looking for. And hopefully we agree that this 0 from your first set of parentheses times whatever is in the second set of parentheses is actually going to give you 0. So there I get that true statement. So one of the numbers that actually makes this 0 is 3/2. Okay, let's go back to the question though. Maybe that's not where the 0 is occurring. Maybe it's in the second one. So I have this other factor of x plus 5. Maybe x plus 5, maybe that's the 0 that's in here. So I'm going to go ahead and solve this. Those cancel. Looks like I get x equals -5. I can go through the exact same process. So I go back to the original question. 2x minus 3, x plus 5 equals 0. And I'm going to plug in what I just found. So in this case, I'm not plugging in a fraction. I'm just going to plug in a -5. So there's my 2. Plug my -5 in. Minus 3. Okay, there's another x. Let's plug a -5 in. And I'm going to go through the same process. The -5 came from the second factor, and I know that -5 plus 5 is 0. Well, to be honest with you, I don't really care what happens in the first set of parentheses because I can see the 0 that's going to force this solution to be 0 equals 0. So going back to my work, I know that the solutions here are going to give me x equals 3/2, or, so maybe that's the 0, or maybe it's x equals -5. Which, if you take a look back at the typed up work here, is exactly where we got the x equals 3/2 and x equals -5. The key here, though, is you have to be able to write it as a multiplication problem. That's why you and I spent time in the last chapter factoring. So let's move on. Okay, so question number 1. I want to be able to solve for x. It's equal to 0. This is good. If you take a look at the left-hand side, currently, this is not a product. Those things are all strung together with addition and subtraction. You think back to last chapter, we wrote these types of problems as a product and as a sum. Right now, this is a sum. This will not do it for us. We need to use 0. We've got the 0. Product. We need to get the product property. So let's go ahead and factor this thing. So first thing, you need to create a product, which means you have to factor, which we know how to do. So at this point, great time, go ahead and pause the video, factor the left-hand side. Ignore the 0 for now. We'll come back to it in just a minute. Okay, so here I've got my factorization done. Now I'm going to go through this whole 0 product property. I'm going to find where the multiplication occurs. Well, what's nice about it, it's where the two factors kind of butt up right against each other. So find that multiplication. Then split this. You're going to need to create both of your possible solutions. So maybe it's the first factor. Maybe it's the x minus 2. Solve for x. And I'm not going to go through and plug it in this time. You can actually do a quick check for yourself. Okay, so maybe the x value that satisfies this 0 business is 2. Maybe it's from the second factor, though. And since we're not sure which one it is, we need to make sure that we list both possibilities. So x equals 2 or x equals 1. And we write both answers because they are both possibilities. Take a look at question number 2. Same idea. So if I ignore the right-hand side, this equals 0. It's got to be 0, though, to get this to work. My job, I have a sum currently. My job is to create a product. So take this opportunity, pause the video, and factor the left-hand side. After you've done that and you've created your product, find where the multiplication happens and split it. Now figure out the possibilities for x. So there's my first possibility. Set 2x plus 1 equals 0, and then I solved for x. But that's not the only possibility. See if you can find the second one. Okay, so it looks like the two values, if I plug them back in to the original question. So if I plug x equals negative half back in all the way at the beginning, 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, the entire left-hand side will be equal to 0. But if I do it again and I plug in x equals 3, that will also give me if I plug in x equals 3, that will give me 0 equals 0. So either of those will work, will satisfy the original question. Okay, so here we go. 3 and 4. Hold off on 4 for just a second. Once you see if you can do 3 all the way through, you need to create a product, so factor, then find where the multiplication occurs, set each of those factors equal to 0 because maybe that's the 0 in disguise, and then solve for x. So pause, see if you can do it. Just question number 3, then come back and check. Okay, go ahead and check your answers against mine. You notice that this was a difference of squares, so a little bit more practice on that. Okay, now for number 4. I asked you to hold off on this one. It's because if you take a look at this, it's not equal to 0. There is no product property for 4. There are an infinite amount of ways to multiply to 4. I know people are thinking there's only 2 ways to do it. You got 2 and 2 or 1 and 4, but that's not true. You could do -2 and -2. You could do -1 and -4. You could even do 8 and half or -8, -half. We could sit here forever and come up with, and still not come up with every single possible way to do this. So there is only a single product property that will work for us here, and it is 0. And it's really powerful because 0 times anything is 0. It doesn't matter what the anything is. So we can't jump straight into, well, let's just factor it. You can't do that. We need the 0 first. So first and foremost, get everybody on the exact same side of the equal sign. So we need to move. So you can move the 4 on the right-hand side to the left, or you can move the 3x squared and the 4x to the right. You guys know I'm a big fan of making sure that my x squared is positive. I think it makes my life easier. So I'm going to move the 4 to the other side. Then by doing that, I'm going to have my 3x squared minus 4x minus 4. They're not like terms, so I can't actually put them together. But now the 4 and the minus 4 cancel. Now I have equals 0. Now I can try to create a product. So it's got to be equal to 0 if you have a fighting chance at this. Now that it is, pause the video, see if you can factor, see if you can go all the way through this whole problem. Come back and check. Okay, so here's my solution. So remember, it's got to be equal to 0. Go through, create the multiplication, so you're going to have to factor. Find where that multiplication occurs, because those the factors represent the things that could be the 0. We don't know which one it is. Could be both. We don't know. So you have to go through and solve for each of them. So the answers here are going to be x equals -2/3 or x equals 2.